2 years later, on the 27th of April 2000, Nintendo released one of the weirdest and most unique games out there, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. This game is unlike any other I have ever played, even in terms of Zelda games. With less than 2 years of development time, the team had to figure out how to make a completely new game. By using Ocarina of Time's game engine and assets, Nintendo managed to pull it off. As a direct sequel, it plays mostly the same, but it's expanded on due to the addition of the new mechanic of masks. There are a total of 24 of them, with some having little to no effect on how you control, but with 3 core ones that change the gameplay and provide Link with unique abilities for a multitude of situations. Swimming as a Zora, extra strength and an awesome rolling mechanic as the Goron, and the Deku allows you to temporarily fly, and gives you magical bubble powers. These 3 additional forms change up the gameplay from Ocarina of Time and are used heavily throughout the whole game. This was a great design decision, as in terms of the items you get, there are less than Ocarina of Time, and they are all the same item as well, with only 3 new items in the Powder Keg Bomb, the Great Fairy Sword and the Picto Box, 2 of which have very limited uses. The main dungeon items are all arrow-based as well, making discovering them quite boring. This doesn't harm the gameplay at all though, as each item is used to its fullest, perhaps even more so than Ocarina of Time. And the masks are frequently used across the game's 5 dungeons and 4 mini-dungeons. That may sound a bit light on content compared to previous games in this series, but Majora's Mask makes up for it with its amazing and deep side quests. Several of which are a necessity to complete the game, but many of them are just for heart pieces, making some less rewarding than others. But the story of each is still charming and fun to do, bar a few which are hindered by the game's overarching mechanic. Before I talk about that though, I need to mention this game's fantastic story. Set shortly after Ocarina of Time's ending, where Link returns to his childhood and Navi flew away, we find Link wandering through a forest on horseback in search of her, when he is suddenly ambushed by the game's main antagonist, the Skull Kid, a returning character from Ocarina of Time, but now with the demonic mask of Majora upon his face. His mischievous pranks are turned into cataclysmic events as the demon Majora controls him and starts dragging a terrifying moon down into the game's new location, Termina. In 3 days, the moon will crash down, killing everyone and destroying the world. Link must traverse the land of Termina to gather the 4 giants in order to stop the moon and defeat Majora. 3 days is not enough though, so Link must use the Ocarina of Time and the Song of Time to revert 3 days back to the point he first entered Termina over and over again in order to complete the many quests laid out before him. This story mechanic is represented in-game by a 3-day cycle system where the characters and events all happen at specific times on specific days. If you mess up a task or miss your time window, you must revert time and wait for that specific moment again. This mechanic is unique and in a lot of ways very fun, creating one of the most alive worlds of any game I've played. The only issue it does create is a lot of the time you are simply stood there doing nothing, waiting for things to happen. This gets tedious and does drag out the length of the game artificially, as there's little you can do during this waiting period, other than a few basic mini-games dotted around the world. One of the most painstaking side quests, in my opinion, is also one of my favourites, the Couple's Mask. You have to wait for specific times of the day on all 3 days to complete it. Miss any of them and you will have to do all of them all over again. Also, there's another mask as part of this side quest, but you can only get it if you choose not to get another reward, meaning you have to repeat most of the steps in the quest in order to 100% the game. You can make time slow down or speed up with the Song of Time, but you can only move time forward by 6 in-game hours, meaning you can be stood around for quite some time. This was thankfully fixed in the 3DS version, but felt like an obvious design flaw in the original that could have been fixed. Despite these issues though, each of the side quests, even when you do have to wait a long time for specific moments, is worthwhile both in their rewards and the wonderful stories that go along with them. Some of them sad, some of them happy, but all of them are full of character and create some of the best side quests you can experience. Some highlights for me being the alien invasion of the ranch, the Couple's Mask quest, despite its long wait times, and the Goron racetrack. As the moon comes ever closer as well, the central town becomes less and less populated as people flee their impending doom, making the situation feel even more dire. I first played the game in 2006 when I came across the Zelda Collector's Edition for GameCube and took a crack at completing it. I originally tried it without a guide and managed to get about halfway through when I got frustrated with the game and gave up. In 2010, when I played through all the Zeldas for the release of Skyward Sword, I finally got around to completing it. In my first few playthroughs, I really didn't enjoy the game very much. I found the time mechanic incredibly stressful, and having to redo full cycles when I messed up became really tedious. With the 3DS release in 2015, I had a lot more fun, especially since finding all the side quests was a lot easier thanks to the improved Bomber's Notebook, a mechanic that stores information as you speak to characters to help you work out when side quests would start. With the 3DS version, I started to see why people loved this game so much, especially with the improved time skip mechanics. Although I used a guide to know what masks I needed to get and when, I mostly played the game without any help and really found it to be a compelling game. For the playthrough for this video, I played the original on the Nintendo Switch, and although the modern features of the 3DS were missed, it was still a great way to play, and the benefit of being able to create save states in case anything goes wrong was very useful. The atmosphere and the story really make this game a classic, and I enjoy it more every time I return. A particular highlight for me is the bizarre ending when you enter the moon and see the beautiful final dungeon landscape. It was the last thing I was expecting. If you collect every mask in the game, which I highly recommend you do, you can fight Majora's Mask pretty much with invincibility thanks to the Fierce Deity mask, turning Link into an adult again. On this playthrough, I decided not to use it, and well, I highly advise you do the same, as Majora's Mask is one of the most enjoyably challenging bosses in the whole franchise, and I wish I'd tried fighting him as regular Link sooner. The other boss fights vary in quality, the first dungeons being good, the second boss fight, where you chase a giant bull rolling as a Goron, being one of the best in the franchise, but it's all sadly let down by the third and fourth boss fights, with tedious fight against the fish as Azora, and a visually exciting fight in the fourth dungeon, but dull in terms of mechanics. Finally, there's the presentation. Graphically, it's a slight upgrade over Ocarina of Time, thanks to the additional RAM from the N64 expansion pack required to play the original game. It gives a bit more detail in the environments and character models. But the music is what really sets it apart. Koji Kondo shines once again as he creates a compelling and dark soundtrack. Majora's theme being especially daunting and the Song of Healing being both peaceful and sad at the same time. It's one of my favourite songs in the whole franchise and is used very meaningfully throughout the game's story. All the songs throughout the game are wonderfully composed, and although there is a few returning ones from Ocarina of Time, there is more than enough new material here. Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time are still two incredible classics. For me, they're not my favourites in the franchise, but the more I play them, the more enjoyment I get out of them, and the more they become some of my favourite games ever. I only wish they could have gotten a third game, as Majora's Mask feels very much like a middle part of a trilogy. Others seem to think this as well. One person, known as Major Link on YouTube, has created an incredible fan animation and story that follows on after the events of Majora's Mask and Link has become an adult. It's amazing work, with episode 5 being one of the best videos I've ever seen on YouTube. I have linked to their channel in the description below. I hope that one day we can also get a game that follows on from Majora's Mask, and we get to see what led to the Hero of Time's cruel fate we see in Twilight Princess. In the meantime though, we can still enjoy the incredible fan animation known as Hero's Purpose, and two of the best games ever made. Cast your minds back to 2004. Okay, I know mind-based time travel is a lot to ask of someone in the first 5 seconds of a video, but stick with me. It had been 2 years since the release of Wind Waker, a game that was both praised and highly divisive among fans for its frankly beautiful art style. Seriously, Zelda fans of the early 2000s, what was wrong with you? It still looks amazing 20 plus years later. Anyway, E3 2004 rolls around and one of Nintendo's most famous E3 presentations happens. Reggie Fils-Aimé breaks into Nintendo history with his famous first lines.
My name is Reggie, I'm about kicking ass, I'm about taking names, and we're about making games.
And the show ends with this. there it is. One of the biggest hype moments in gaming history. Fans had gotten exactly what they wanted. A dark, gritty, and mature Legend of Zelda game. As you can see, the crowd lost their collective minds. Shigeru Miyamoto came out on stage with a Master Sword and Hyrulean Shield, and, well, meme templates were born. Joy was felt across the world, nations united in pure excitement of a new, gritty Zelda. Sony and Microsoft bowed down in defeat.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Okay, a few of those things probably didn't happen. But it did get pretty crazy as Nintendo announced The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, a game that ended up releasing on 4 different systems over the course of 11 years, and is potentially going to release again for the Switch someday. Presumably. Maybe. Either way, it's time to enter into a dark and moody world in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. This was the first game in the series that I was around for the hype phase of. That initial 2004 reveal trailer was a bit before I got into the franchise around 2005, but I could see the appeal and I was still excited for it, despite being in that stage between owning Wind Waker and actually getting into it. When I did play and complete it though, and started my love for the franchise alongside it, Twilight Princess quickly became the first game I can remember following everything about in the build-up to its release. Every trailer, article and gameplay demo I watched thoroughly, and my excitement for its release just continued to build. The 2006 E3 demo though gave me a first-class ticket to the hype train, showing off the features of Nintendo's next big console with the Wii's motion controls in full effect. At that point, Twilight Princess became the thing I was more excited for than anything else in the world. First releasing on 19th of November 2006 in the USA alongside the Wii, but with me living in the UK, I had to hold out for another 2 to 3 weeks for it to arrive. But the wait was worth every second. I remember the day vividly. It was the second games console I'd bought with my own money on release day after the Nintendo DS a year prior. I kicked things off with about 20 minutes of Wii Sports to see how amazing the motion controls were, which I remember thinking were incredible at the time. Then I switched over to Twilight Princess. I played for about an hour, but then I had to go to a stupid party about an hour away. I stayed the night, but the next day I got the first train home just so I could play Zelda for the rest of the weekend. It was amazing. Playing with a controller unlike anything before it, I felt like gaming had taken a huge leap forward in its immersion. I must have played it for at least 8 hours that day, getting into a few dungeons and just absolutely falling in love with it. 2 weeks later I finished it, but weirdly I didn't return for quite a long time. Jumping forward to December 2023 where I used the Wii U HD version to play through it for this video, I had some worries. You see, despite how much I loved Twilight Princess when I first played it on the Wii, I found every subsequent playthrough just wasn't fun for me. I found the graphics to be dull and lifeless, I found it long and boring, and ultimately the few times I returned to this gritty Hyrule, it just never gave me that same excitement. When the Wii U version released on 14th of March 2016, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped, and I didn't play it again until it was time to make this video. I went in with fears of boredom and disinterest again, but after 3 or so hours, those fears were completely gone, and all that enjoyment I first felt came rushing back. But you're probably wondering, why specifically 3 hours? Well, that's because the opening of this game kind of sucks. To show why, I have to talk about how the prior 3D titles kick things off. In Ocarina of Time, you are given a small explorable area to get used to the controls, get some basics down, and generally just have a playground style area to get to grips with things. If you want, you can skip pretty much all of that, grab the sword and shield, and be in the first dungeon within 5 or so minutes. In Majora's Mask, Link is turned into a Deku within a few minutes, setting a tone for the story. And within a few more minutes you're in an open, explorable town with hardly any idea of what you're doing or where to go, all building up to a dark and foreboding setup to the story. Wind Waker, you have a similar style as Ocarina of Time again, of having a playground style area to get used to the controls, explore, and within minutes you're going to have a sword and are fighting a few enemies, before setting off to your first dungeon. Now then, let's compare that to Twilight Princess. First, you have a few minutes of cutscenes before you have to go and get Epona back from Lila? Ilya? I'm sorry, I don't recognize that spelling of the name. Whoever it is has taken her into the forest. Okay, diving straight into adventure, are we, Nintendo? Oh no, it's another cutscene. Okay, it's a bit more story-based and cinematic, that's fine. Then you have to play Epona's song, something you're not gonna do again for a good several hours. Why is that the first thing the game is teaching me? Okay, now I get to ride Epona, so maybe this is going to lead into an escape or a chase scene or... No, it's gonna give me a minigame of wrangling goats. Woo? Okay, not the best start, but we're done now, and we leap over the fence, and it's the next day. Okay, well I bet we find a dungeon this day, right? Right? What, are you kidding? Of course you're not gonna find one. There are screaming children outside instead. Okay, let's go outside to see what they want. They want a slingshot, run around the town and find rupees to buy it. But with no sword, you will have to pick up and throw pumpkins to find said money. Once you have it, you practice with the slingshot, then you fish, then you chase a cat, then you carry a wicker baby basket as slow as possible, deal with the bratty children again, call a hawk to stop a monkey. Yeah, that really does happen. And after 30 minutes, you finally get a sword. Only to discover that it's made of wood. Then Nintendo's mid-2000s over-tutorialization rears its ugly head to teach you as slowly as possible how to use the sword. Okay, let's skip ahead 20 minutes. Oh, you're perhaps expecting a dungeon? Well, here is herding goats again! Oh my god, this opening is so painful. The first hour isn't even really tutorials. It's more just boring little mini-games and fetch quests that you only do once or twice for the rest of the 40-hour or so adventure. When something interesting does finally happen at the hour mark, you would be forgiven for expecting to get to run around with a real sword and maybe get into a dungeon. No, now you have to run around as Wolf Link and see more story first. I hate this opening. After the first hour, the story at least gets a little interesting with getting pulled into the Twilight Realm. Meeting Zelda and running around as a wolf is a little bit interesting. But the game's first 2 hours is so heavily focused on story and setting that the gameplay felt like an afterthought. There was no need at all to make this opening so locked in, so inescapable or skippable. Frankly, it's the worst opening in the series I can think of. Although I don't remember Skyward Sword's opening all too well, so I'll hold off on final judgment until the next video. Thankfully, Nintendo moved on from this style of opening, as did the rest of the industry, because there is little to no enjoyment for anyone here. Thankfully though, after this long, tedious opening, everything just goes from strength to strength. Let's kick off the more positive side of this game with its story and world, which is one of the best in the franchise. Link is already established in this world as an adult. He has a life, friends, and weirdly no family again, but definitely has a bit more of a character to his life than previous games. After 1 hour of just, oh my god, pure boredom, he gets pulled into the Twilight Realm, transformed into a wolf, and is saved by a new character, Midna, an imp-like creature from the Twilight Realm. The story is going for a lot more character building here, and lets off an anime style of storytelling. As Link travels Hyrule, removing the Twilight, saving his friends, and seeing the world in a somewhat shonen anime style, we get a very rich feeling world. Okay, sure, from a technical perspective, it's still fairly empty in places, but there is a lot of core areas such as Hyrule Town, Kakariko Village, Zora's Domain, and more that show a lot of character and detail to this world. As the story moves forward, we learn of the evil Twilight creature Zant, one of the weirdest and most memorable villains in the franchise. We also see how much this world can expand. Areas that felt quite small before suddenly expand into exciting new areas, such as a huge open Gerudo desert just off to the side of Lake Hylia, a blizzard-covered mountain just through a cave next to Zora's Domain, a Wild West town full of cats, and one of the coolest areas in the series, a return to the Lost Woods and the Temple of Time, now ironically ruined by the passing of time. These little surprises pop up throughout the adventure multiple times, and make its world feel so perfectly crafted for the story and gameplay. It's obviously not on as grand of a scale as Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom's map, but for the time, it felt absolutely massive in its scope, and still has a good scale today, and fits perfectly with the gameplay. Which was actually the main thing I was concerned about returning to this game for, especially after how smooth Wind Waker HD played. I was concerned it was going to feel clunky and slow compared to what I'd become accustomed to, But surprisingly, despite some early clunkiness, I quickly adapted to the feel of things. I don't remember if the original version played this smoothly, but the HD version holds up very well in terms of its controls. It is missing some of Wind Waker HD's cool extra features, such as being able to move around in first person, which I have no idea as to why was not included, but it does have motion controlled aiming and a full 3D camera, which is something that was missing from the Wii version. So overall, it controls very well and makes the gameplay all the better because of it, which is pure traditional Zelda style. It is basically what you would expect Ocarina of Time to play like had it been made for the GameCube. Intricate dungeons with multiple and varied mechanics across them, focusing heavily on environment-based puzzles, semi-open world exploration across multiple environments and large-scale areas, and a fun and engaging combat system that frankly is yet to be beat in the Zelda franchise. To me, the combat is a slowed-down version of Wind Waker's system, except rather than pressing A to parry enemies' attacks and automatically countering, you instead have to manually respond to enemy attacks and defense in order to fight. For example, in Wind Waker, Link would roll around an enemy and strike with the press of a single button when prompted, whereas in Twilight Princess, you learn new attacks as you progress, and that same action now requires multiple inputs from the player and can be done at any time. You can shield bash enemies and leap over them to strike their heads, roll around them to hit them in the back, sacrifice defense for a lethal strike, and the most fun of all, a finishing move that can be used on downed enemies that is incredibly satisfying to use. It should have stayed part of the franchise going forward, but sadly doesn't appear after Skyward Sword. This combat is really fun, and as I said, is my favourite in the franchise. Unfortunately though, it isn't really that challenging on a standard playthrough, but thankfully Twilight Princess HD brought with it a bit of an extra challenge. Hero mode returns, where no hearts appear and you take double the damage, but you can also bring in some extra difficulty here by using the Ganondorf amiibo, where you take double damage again on top of the hero mode's extra damage. So for a good 50% of your playtime, you will lose most, if not all of your health from even one basic hit. It is punishing, and I absolutely loved it. I always found the original game to be way too easy, but adding this difficulty really made every fight feel like a battle. Boss fights became much more challenging, and the Dark Nut enemies are truly a daunting task, especially when there is more than one of them. A recurring mini-boss, King Bulbin, would take half of Link's health in one attack, and by the final encounter, I had almost every heart piece in the game and still took an insane amount of damage. Complementing that combat is some amazing dungeons, while also having a large amount of them as well. If you found Wind Waker's 5 dungeons to be a bit lacking, well, you're in luck, because Twilight Princess has 9 full-scale dungeons, and each of them is a unique and ultimately fun experience, ranging from forests, volcanoes, and underwater temples, to temples in the sky, other dimensions, and even back in time. This game has fantastic variation in its design. The puzzle and general dungeon design across all 9 of them is, in my opinion, some of the best in the franchise even today, aided by some of the best items that are used in some of the most unique ways. There's metal boots that magnetize the walls and roofs, the Dominion Rod for controlling ancient statues that can crash through metal gates, and of course the amazing spinner which gets used so perfectly, if sadly not quite enough. Of course, I also have to mention the claw shot as well. Now, several Zelda games have used this kind of item before, but Twilight Princess doubles the fun by giving you 2 of them, which allows for some of the most fun traversal puzzles in the series. All of the items get used quite frequently, but because this is one of the biggest Zelda games and there are so many items here, it never feels quite enough for each one and leaves you wanting more. Other items include the standard bombs and bow and arrow, which feels particularly satisfying in this game thanks to some great sound design and that you can even combine them. There's a boomerang with the power to create gales, and even a huge ball and chain that can crash through boulders. Everything is very satisfying to use here and hasn't been topped in the franchise since. I could talk about all of the items and dungeons in detail, but the video would be way too long if I did. I will talk about one of them in particular though. The Temple of Time. It's not necessarily the best dungeon in Twilight Princess, although it's definitely up there, but to me it's undoubtedly the most interesting. Partway through the story you get the Master Sword from the decayed ruins of the Temple of Time. but when you later return there, you travel back in time to see that it has a full dungeon hidden within it. The puzzles here are fun, challenging, and unique, but for me, it's the lore of the dungeon that really sells it. Seeing the iconic structure from Ocarina of Time turned into something much grander was so amazing to see. There's also the tantalizing notion of not knowing what time period Link has returned to. Is this before, during, or after Ocarina of Time? Sadly, you never find out, but that curiosity alone is intriguing enough to make it such a memorable experience. There is also the Sky Dungeon, which feels like it has so many connections to the next game in the series, Skyward Sword. I don't imagine it's something the developers really had in mind, but it's still exciting to connect the lore together in your own way. One more thing that needs to be mentioned about the dungeons is some of the most cinematic boss fights in the entire series. From the second one onwards, they are all large-scale, exciting fights. There's a Goron on fire, an underwater giant worm that you have to clawshot and stab into the ground, a giant skeleton that you have to Beyblade your way up to defeat, a huge ancient spider, a giant dragon that you have to ride and fight into the ground, and there's the fast-paced battle against the new creepy villain Zant. All of these are really exciting battles. They are a bit on the easy side, but with the quadruple damage option in the HD version and the option to switch to a weaker sword, they all give a good challenge. Finally, behind Zant, controlling everything, is Ganondorf. Back for the third time in the series with once again an incredible and intimidating design. His final battle, although a bit easy, is a 4-stage dramatic and creative battle, covering both his demon pig form and his human form on horseback, all culminating in an epic final one-on-one fight. Again, that last fight is too easy, but the drama, the tension, and the incredible music make it one of the best dramatic battles in the series. One last area of the gameplay to mention is, of course, Wolf Link. This was one of the key features in the marketing for Twilight Princess. Getting to transform into a wolf at almost any time and have a different moveset was a very intriguing idea. Sadly though, I feel it wasn't executed in a particularly interesting way. There are very few moments beyond the first half of the story that you are either required to or would even want to transform into a wolf. The form has much less effective attacks that are both weaker and harder to hit with. There's no ranged attacks, bar an auto-target move that can kill some enemies in one hit, and you can't use any items at all, overall making the wolf form much less effective and versatile to use. The only real benefit you get from this form is a higher speed, allowing you to dart around areas faster than Link's human form. But there is rarely a reason to use that speed beyond not having Epona readily available. Ultimately, Wolf Link is an interesting addition, but sadly an underutilized one, that was more of a cool story beat and game mechanic than one that was actually cleverly integrated into the gameplay. This is evidenced by the fact he is only needed to defeat one form of Ganondorf and a handful of enemies throughout the whole game. It gives me the impression that perhaps this form was a late addition in the development of Twilight Princess. As for the rest of the story, well, although it's not necessarily the most intricate one told in video games, its key moments and lore building are incredible. The first time Link sees Zant is amazing. You complete the third dungeon and warp back to the overworld. Link turns around and is instantly taken down by Zant. And Midna, Link's guide and companion throughout the story, is nearly killed on the spot, really displaying the power of this villain and setting up a reason to find the Master Sword. You also get a great scene that tells the dark and twisted story of the Triforce. It's depicted in a creepy and compelling cutscene that lets off a very Majora's Mask style vibe. But Twilight Princess goes deeper than just vibes of other games in the series. Like Wind Waker, it has direct connections to Ocarina of Time. After Link returned to his childhood, he warned Zelda of Ganondorf's plan. He is arrested, and the sages attempt to execute him. They stab him through the chest, but the gods still provide him with the Triforce of Power, enabling him to take the sword out of his chest and kill the sage with their own weapon. As a last resort, they trap him in the Twilight Realm, leaving the people of that world to deal with him instead. The story is set several generations after Ocarina of Time, but we still see remnants of that world. For example, the Sheikah tribe, guardians of the Hyrule family, are all but wiped out, and it appears only a version of Impa survives, hidden out in a Wild West shanty town full of cats. It's about as adorable as it sounds. But the best connection of all is a mysterious golden wolf. When you find him, he takes you for training and transforms into a Stalfos. a creature humans turn into if they get lost in the forest without a fairy to guide them, something Link was missing at the end of Majora's Mask. This Stalfos is intelligent, can transform, and trains Link in the way of the hero. In-game, it is heavily hinted that this Stalfos is Link from Ocarina of Time, and it was even confirmed in the Hyrule Historia book from 2011. To this day, in my opinion, it's the best lore connection in the series, and I can only hope they take it further in the future. The only area of the story that is a bit of a letdown in this game is that Zelda is barely in it, and doesn't really have much of a role, if not any role, to play in it. She helps Link right at the last moment and saves Midna at one point, but otherwise you barely see her for the whole game. During development, there were plans to have Zelda return as Sheik, but it was cut for whatever reason. It's a shame, as she is a good design for the character and could have been used much more interestingly. Thankfully though, Midna is used very well throughout the story, going from an angry and vengeful creature who is only out for herself, to coming to truly care for Link and Zelda and the world of Hyrule. She is one of the best written characters in the series in terms of her motivations and characteristics, that again has not really been topped in the franchise since. She has remained a fan favourite since her one and only appearance in the franchise. Lastly, I have to mention the presentation. And well, this is an odd one to cover. Let's start off with the bad. The graphics have not aged well. When you first boot up even the HD version, it frankly looks ugly in places. Character models are very blocky in design and are very low in texture detail. Link specifically was improved for the HD version, but not by enough. And overall, everything is just very dull and lifeless. The beautiful, bold design of Wind Waker is mostly gone and replaced with a colourless and drab art style that not only aged poorly, but didn't exactly look great when it first released. Nintendo followed the darker tone that other games were going for at the time, and although it's what fans wanted, it definitely gave a very muted style, and generally, it's just not as interesting as Wind Waker's. However, weirdly, in this playthrough, the art style grew on me. I started to really appreciate the lighting and how its subtlety really gave off a unique look. The darker and grittier style gave me vibes of Lord of the Rings, and ultimately, by the end, it had completely captured me. Sure, it hasn't aged well, and is nowhere near as good as Wind Waker, but it's still beautiful in its own way. The music is, as always, still amazing here. Sure, there is some boring tracks like the battle music, but there's also amazing ones, such as Midna's Lament, Kakariko Village, The Hidden Town, and many more areas. The fight against Ganondorf has one of the most intimidating and multi-tiered songs in the franchise, and the overall theme is also incredible, being on par with Wind Waker's. Even the title screen has an incredible piece to kick off the mood. Sadly, it still uses MIDI music rather than a full orchestra, and overall does seem to have a lower audio quality than Wind Waker, but it does still hold up well today. The presentation overall holds up pretty well, despite its graphics not being the best. However, it is massively let down by its lack of voice acting. This is the first in the series where I feel it is truly harmed by the lack of it. The cutscenes are much more cinematic than before, and since characters' mouths now move during cutscenes, it is incredibly off-putting for them to make no sound. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it could have been so much better had they given it the full voice acting it deserved. So overall, what do I think of Twilight Princess now? Well, despite an incredibly boring and long opening, its lack of voice acting, and not having exactly the most exciting art style, I still find it to be great. The extra difficulty fixed one of the main issues I had with the Wii version, and once you get past the first few hours of the adventure, all of the annoying aspects of it never make a return. This is the last time we got a fully traditional 3D Zelda game, with a focus on dungeons, a large explorable world that, although open, is still restricted in just the right way to give a strong feeling of progression, and overall just took the older 3D Zelda style to its grandest and most epic scale it's ever been. I would love to see either a direct sequel to Twilight Princess in the same style, or an entirely new Zelda with that classic format. The series would change up a lot after this, but it was a hell of a swan song for that classic 3D style to go out on, and still stands as one of the best games in the franchise. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures. Released on the 18th of March 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube, this is in my opinion still the best multiplayer Zelda game, and just a great multiplayer game in general. This was one of the few games for the system that used the GBA as a full controller, meaning it does play pretty much the same as the original Four Swords. But everything feels much larger in scope, and the overall gameplay was refined to become a much more enjoyable experience. This is probably due to the fact that it was a fully fledged Zelda game this time around. I first bought and played it sometime around 2008. It was one of the last games I picked up from my local video game store before they shut for good, when the game brand stores started to become big in the UK. I remember seeing it on the shelf, knowing nothing about it beyond the fact it was multiplayer. I bought it on a whim, jumped straight into the single player, and loved it pretty much straight away. The first thing that grabbed me was the presentation. From the get-go, you are presented with a basic but eye and ear-catching title screen. It lets off a Link to the Past style vibe with its stormy background and its slower-paced rendition of the Legend of Zelda theme. Technically, the GameCube is the most high-powered console to have an original pixel-style Zelda game, and the developers took full advantage of that. By combining 3D and 2D objects, you get a unique look to the game that mixes Wind Waker and Link to the Past into a coherent style. Explosions, fire, water, and other elements and mechanics look great here. With a slightly cartoony and bolder look than the rest of the game, they stand out in just the right way. The music is great here too, with a mix of entirely new and remakes of older tracks packing out a good-sized soundtrack that gives off vibes of several Zelda games. Composed once again by the incredible Koji Kondo alongside Asuko Ota, the soundtrack is particularly strong, mixing classic Zelda-style music with a few more modern sounds. As of this recording, it showcases the last time a mainline Zelda title used a more classic retro style for its music. It would be great to see a new mainline pixel-style Zelda one day, especially after how amazing the spin-off title, Cadence of Hyrule for the Switch, looks and sounds. Although it boasts a strong presentation, the story is still pretty basic. The seal around Vati's imprisonment within the Four Sword is weakening, so Link and Zelda visit the Shrine of the Four Sword to check in, only to discover that a Shadow Link is causing problems. Link takes the Four Sword, splitting him into four in order to defeat him, but he releases Vati in doing so. Vati captures Zelda and the 6 Shrine Maidens and imprisons them around Hyrule. The Links travel around to free them, but on the way discover that the Demon King Ganon has been behind everything, and created Shadow Link using the Dark Mirror to trick him into releasing Vati. After the 4 Links save Zelda, the 6 Maidens, and 4 mysterious knights, they defeat Vati and Ganondorf. The end. It's better than Four Swords on the GBA, but it's still not to the same standard or quality as other Zelda titles. Moving on to the gameplay, let's start where I did, with the single player. Nintendo made sure to make this into a fun experience, regardless of the number of players present. Unlike with the original Four Swords, this one has a full single player mode. You can play with a GBA or a GameCube controller when playing by yourself, and when you enter into caves, a virtual GBA pops up on screen, allowing you to still see above and below to solve some of the game's screen-crossing puzzles. Speaking of the puzzles, Four Swords Adventure shines in this aspect. Whether playing alone or with friends, the puzzles are intricate and fun to solve most of the time, and show a lot of creativity from the developers. Some areas of the game even change slightly to accommodate one player, allowing the developers to go a bit more experimental with them for the multiplayer. For example, in the multiplayer, each player can carry a different item, but in the single player, where you control all 4 Links collectively, you can only carry one. As such, there had to be changes to accommodate that. There are some bonuses to playing alone though. With the single player, a cool feature you do get is formations. You can swap the 4 Links into 4 different positions in order to best tackle puzzles and enemies. You can also separate them out for better positioning against bosses or for puzzles. If you combine them together though, it does multiply your attack power, so there is a little strategy to the combat here that is wholly unique to this game, and does change slightly in the multiplayer. Playing alone or with friends does give 2 slightly different experiences, and I would say it's worth experiencing both. How about the multiplayer though? Well, this is my first time playing it through with another person. Me and my partner Katie played through the whole game, each controlling 2 Links. I've been playing Zelda games for around 2 decades now, whereas this is her first top-down Zelda game, so there was a lot of, shall we say, frustrating moments. There were situations where the puzzle or action was completely obvious to me, but to her was damn near impossible. Despite the fact that she has platinumed every From Software game available, she struggled to avoid spotlights, avoid bombs, or just pay attention to things that seemed completely obvious to me. It really goes to show how two people can be good at games, but depending on your history with them, you may find some things so much more difficult than others. Zelda is very good at homaging its own puzzles from previous games, so I of course know them all pretty well, whereas Katie is seeing them for the first time, and it really shows how these puzzles can be very intricate and even confusing to new players. It was genuinely one of the most interesting playthroughs of a game with another person I think I've ever experienced, and not just because of the game itself. But I digress. The multiplayer here is pretty damn amazing. It's in my opinion still the best multiplayer Zelda experience available, with great level design, mostly inspired by A Link to the Past, but with some unique additions and twists that mix up the gameplay. Like with the original Four Swords, the game is split up into levels. However, this time there's a lot more, with 8 worlds with 3 levels each, making for around 15 hours of playtime. Each world consists of a more open area leading up to the second level, which is generally a dungeon with a mini-boss. And the third level is a mix of the two, leading to the main boss for that area. The structure works pretty well, giving you a traditional Zelda feel and a more digestible style for multiplayer. The pacing of the game, though, does leave something to be desired at times. Most levels will take you maybe between 20 and 30 minutes, but there are a few that just seem to go on forever, lasting upwards of an hour or more with no way of saving mid-level and returning to it. Nintendo's tutorialization of its games also rears its ugly head here, where you get repeatedly reminded that Force Gem colors are worth X amount, and repeatedly get stopped to show off that you've collected certain ones. I have to say it does harm the experience at times, making some levels more frustrating than enjoyable, and the collection of large amounts of Force Gems can be very annoying. Overall, it does flow reasonably well from start to finish, but it definitely needed more trimming down within some levels, and for Nintendo to just trust its players to remember basic information about the game's mechanics. There are also a few levels that are just too puzzle-focused. One level in particular is a riddle-like puzzle where you have to interact with multiple characters in multiple areas across multiple screens. It ends up with one player just kind of waiting around with nothing to do, while the other player talks to people. There's hardly any enemies, and not really any side quests for them to do. It's long, it's tedious, and ultimately it drags out the playtime artificially, leading to a level I never want to have to repeat. But thankfully, there's only a few of these in the game. The variety of mechanics on show here make for fun moments, such as discovering that fire spreads across the grass for the first time in the series, or the best use of the dual world mechanic seen in other Zelda titles. Here, when you enter into the mirror world, you switch over to the GBA screen, but you can still interact with the main world on the TV screen, such as picking up other players to cross over gaps, or being able to move objects between dimensions. It's a great use of the dual worlds mechanic that would have fit perfectly with the 3DS or DS games, but was sadly never used outside of this title. There are several items in the game that are also used pretty well, and like with Four Swords, they are swapped out frequently across the game to help give puzzles more variety, and to give you different options in combat. Speaking of the combat, it's in my opinion the best for a classic style Zelda game. In single player, utilising the 4 links available to you is crucial in defeating bosses, and whether you're playing single or multiplayer, fighting huge hordes of enemies is always exciting and fun. It even has a slight competitive option of counting up the total number of kills per player, which leads to a final score at the end of each level to decide the victor. I also really enjoyed a lot of the bosses in this game. A lot of them do a great job of utilising the features of the game itself, especially the GBA screen. It allows for battles that cross multiple screens, and most of them require you to work together with other players to take them down. All of this while still being fun for a single player experience as well. Playing multiplayer also has a few other perks, other than of course just having someone else to play the game with. First off, fighting for the triangular rupee-style money known as Force Gems is a lot more fun here than the original Four Swords, as huge amounts of Force Gems are thrown out to fight over. And if you're not quick enough, that sneaky little sod Tingle likes to show up out of nowhere and try to steal them. Secondly, each world has a fun minigame ran by the man himself, Tingle, such as horseback racing, puzzle games, combat games, and more that cannot be played in single player. And there is also the side game Shadow Battle, where Link can literally fight amongst themselves. There is not much to it in 2 players, but I imagine 4 players would have a great time here. In the Japanese version of the game, there is even a fully voice-acted side game called Tetra's Trackers, which you could actually play single player. I tried it out, I had no idea what was happening, but it seemed fun enough, even if Tetra would just not stop yelling at me. So there are clearly a lot of clever design ideas put into the game. which makes it an even bigger shame that it is still locked to the GameCube, and to a very expensive way to do multiplayer. Each player needs a GBA and a link cable to join in, and considering how expensive GBAs can be on the second-hand market, and not many people have a GameCube anymore, the multiplayer is sadly tough to organise a group around. It's a great idea, but in practice, it's just too messy and expensive to play, especially when it launched. In the early 2000s, GBAs cost around £100 each, a link cable cost you around $15, and the game was around about £40. Top all that off with a GameCube at around £120, and you are looking at around £600 or more to play this game to the fullest during its release. Even now, you'd be looking at over £300 to get the consoles, the game, and everything you need off the second-hand market to play this as intended. With these costs in mind, despite owning this game, a system to play on, and all the accessories, and even the Japanese version of the game, as you can see, I used the Dolphin emulator for this playthrough, which loses some of the fun factor of having your own screen in hand. This game can and should have been ported to the Wii U, or as a much more financially sensible idea, to the Nintendo Switch, but it looks unlikely to happen and has sadly become a bit of a forgotten gem in the Zelda pantheon of games. Overall though, Four Swords Adventures, whether you have to play through an emulator or you can actually get all of this madness together to play, it's still a fantastic time. Whether it's multiplayer or single, this is a Zelda title every fan should play, and one that definitely needs another chance in the spotlight with a modern remake. It's unlikely to happen, but hey.
Oh, a man can dream, though. A man can dream.